Well, thanks. I felt a little bit awkward when I was asked to say some words on Maurice's behalf because he is one of those individuals that I never actually knew personally, and yet I feel fundamentally touched my life in the work that he did, and his legacy is clearly felt so strongly over these past couple weeks where this issue of climate change is suddenly getting the level of attention that it deserves. And it is too bad that he's not here to witness that, but his legacy is certainly felt. I wanted to say a few words about that legacy. Again, though I never met him, his contribution to environmental sustainability, I think rightfully sometimes called the father of global sustainable development. I think that is a fair description of his contribution. As was already mentioned here, he did pass away on the eve of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, and that agreement constituted a monumental development in the battle to combat climate change that was in many ways a consequence of his efforts. He was the primary force behind the 1992 Rio Earth Summit that really did lay the groundwork for the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and subsequent global climate agreements. But we heard this quote of his from the 2014 UN General Assembly that really I find very profound in this moment. When he called on world leaders to rise to their historic responsibility as custodians of the planet, to take decisions that will unite rich and poor, north, south, east, and west, in a new global partnership to ensure our common future. And I can think of no greater testament to Maurice's legacy than what we have witnessed this past week here in New York City and around the world, with millions of people rising up and demanding that we finally realize this vision. And I think we will. I am optimistic. There were some comments earlier about sort of doom and gloom and negativity and hopelessness, and I do think that this is one of the greatest threats that we face today when it comes to this challenge. In some of the recent polling that's been done here in the US, it was a recent CBS poll, and they looked at people who don't support taking action on climate. And if you look at the crosstabs of that poll, it turns out now nearly as many people don't support action because they think it's too late to do anything, as don't support action because they don't accept the reality of climate change. Now, I think that some of the forces of inaction and denial that I know Maurice faced, and hearing some of his stories, I felt like we were kindred spirits because we probably faced many of those same obstacles and efforts to sort of silence us and intimidate us because of the message that we need to do something, even if it challenges, vested interests. I think that some of those forces of denial and inaction today recognize that they simply can't deny the overwhelming physical evidence that climate change is happening. The impacts of climate change are so profound. We see them playing out in real time. We see the damage. We see the death and destruction. So you can't deny something's happening. So the forces of inaction are looking for other ways to prevent the needed transition away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. They're looking to drive a wedge within the climate community to divide us on issues like personal responsibility versus collective action and systemic change. They would love nothing more than to see us arguing with each other about cheeseburgers and plastic straws and whether we should fly, during the vacation to see our relatives. They're looking for ways to divide the movement, and one of those ways is doom and gloom, and convincing us that there's nothing we can do. Because if you truly believe that there is no agency in the actions that we are taking, it leads you down the same path of inaction as outright denial of climate change. And they don't care what gets you on that path of inaction, they just want you on that path of inaction. So I feel, from what I know and have heard the stories about Maurice, that I think he would have very much recognized that that is a threat, and that we do need hope and optimism, and not false hope, not Pollyannish optimism, but a recognition, and the science supports this, that there is still time to act to prevent the worst from happening. So I feel like all of that is now coming to a head. Here in New York, over the last 2 weeks, I think we will look back at this moment as having been a tipping point. Not the climate tipping points that we fear, but a tipping point in the public consciousness when it comes to the need to act on this existential crisis. And I can't help but imagine that Maurice is looking down with some pride that his vision may now be realized. So thank you very much.